So we're going to go right into construction bonding and insurance. We will have a quick break after this, so just so you know. With us, we have Zach Cartwright. He is the Risk and Compliance Analyst for Office of Procurement, or OPO. So welcome, Zach.
Thank you. So again, my name is Zach Cartwright, and I'm the Risk and Compliance Analyst in the ODOT Procurement Office. Today we'll be talking about bonding and insurance within the construction industry. I'm not going to be able to save you money in 15 minutes, but I've developed a tool to where it'll only take about 15 minutes to assess the risk, and we'll be going through that here pretty soon. And the object of this tool is to reduce ODOT's risk liability. So first I wanted to gain a grasp and understanding of where we are in the racetrack. So really when we start touching bond types and insurance types, we're in the planning phase. And in the planning phase, hopefully you have a great idea about your scope of work, about your project, and about the risk exposures of the project, because this will enable you to do and complete insurance risk assessment. So first I want to go over bond types and insurance types just to gain a basic understanding of what they are, how they're applicable, and then we'll go through about completing an insurance risk assessment in order to assess the risk of the project to come up with appropriate insurance types and amounts. So anybody knows what a bond is? Somewhat, some people? Perfect. So the bonds are actually specified in the standard spec. The types of bonds and the amounts of the bonds are stipulated within the standard spec and are put in our contract. Insurance types and amounts are not. That's something that you work with OPO in order to come up with the applicable insurance types and amounts. And we'll be going over insurance types and amounts soon as well. So bonds are basically like a promise. It's a security provided to ODOT as a promise or a guarantee that something is going to happen. For instance, a bid bond is a security furnished to ODOT as a guarantee that the contractor is going to accept the contract if they're awarded the contract. And that's stipulated at 10% of the bid. So if the contractor backs out and says, once they were awarded the contract, backs out and says, no, I'm not going to do that, that's where we'll be compensated for our time and energy and resources. A performance bond is a security furnished to ODOT in regards as a guarantee that the contractor will perform in regards to the contract. The standard spec stipulates that this is the value of the contract of the performance bond. Now, a payment bond is a security furnished to ODOT as a guarantee of the contractor's obligations to pay for materials, equipment, and labor. If that payment does not go out, that could potentially be a claim against the project, and the payment bond is supposed to be there in place in order to provide coverage in case that doesn't happen. In case, for instance, subcontractors aren't paid, then they'll put a hold on the contract itself. All right. So again, these are all stipulated within the standard spec, but what's not stipulated within standard spec and what's a little bit more unknown is the insurance part. Now, who's used the PDWP for conducting an insurance risk assessment? Okay, so quite a few people. And do you like the tool? No. Well, I'll be happy to say that I've been working on developing a new tool to reach new industry standards, and it's something that's user-friendly, and we had a subgroup together, and I worked with that subgroup with some of you, had some of you also beta test the tool. So this tool was developed for you for user-friendliness, ease of use, ease of project documentation, and we'll be going through that here pretty soon. So I hope to hear good things after the presentation. So first, let's get a basic understanding of insurance. Workers' compensation is required in all of our contracts. Workers' compensation provides wage replacement and medical benefits to employees that are hurt on the job. Now we're talking about contractors' insurance, right? Not our insurance, but contractors' insurance. Employers' liability is also a requirement, and a new requirement in some contracts, and we're asking for $500,000 in coverage for employers' liability. Now this protects employees from financial loss if the worker incurs an injury on the job and the claim isn't covered by workers' compensation. So it's a little bit extra coverage for the employee. Anybody know what commercial general liability is? Some? Okay. And that's why we're going over this, is to gain a basic understanding of what insurance is, because whenever someone says the word insurance, there's like a wall that goes in front of your mind and you just don't want to hear anymore. Hopefully I'm here to break down that wall. So commercial general liability is actually now required on all state contracts. Commercial general liability is a general policy that protects the general liabilities of any business, right? So I'm going into Fred Meyer and I slip and fall. It's their commercial general liability that takes place because I was hurt, right? So commercial general liability covers the operations of a business, whether that be construction or a local retail store or whatever. It covers the general liability in regards to bodily injury or property damage to others. So really, insurance-wise, this is kind of the bread and butter of insurance for all types of businesses, especially construction. Now, I hope to see some hands on this one. Who knows what automobile liability is? Okay, well, some of you are awake. I see some hands. So automobile liability, we all have it. It's a requirement by law that we have it. Automobile liability is very similar to commercial general liability, although it involves driving a vehicle, right? So whenever I'm driving a vehicle, it will cover me while I'm operating the vehicle if I cause, or the contractor causes, bodily injury or property damage to any other party, right? So additional coverages, and I'll tell you why coverages are important in a minute. Additional coverages are non-typical coverages, but I want to see hands in here about unique projects, non-typical projects that we have out there. So we have some unique, and I'll get into that a little bit later. We have some unique projects out there that require pollution liability. Who's ever used a watercraft on a project, or a contractor used a watercraft on a project? Yeah, we have some of those. So non-typical, right? It doesn't happen all the time, but it's something that we need to assess for because there's a huge exposure for ODOT and the contractor if we don't assess it correctly. Drones? Anybody use drones on a project? So some people, and that's getting more and more popular, right? So people are using drones in order to reduce their liability. It's a risk mitigation strategy to reduce their liability of putting their workers where a drone can go, right? So it's a lower cost in case an employee gets hurt rather than a drone falling and damaging itself. Now the reason why insurance is very important is because if we have insurance in place, that protects the contractor and ODOT, and I'll get to that in a minute, if there's any liability or risk exposures, if there's any incidents, bodily injury, property damage that happens. So if there's any property damage or bodily injury that happens, and someone sees that, it happens to them, they go to a good lawyer, what's going to happen? That good lawyer is going to file a lawsuit against ODOT, right? Because people driving down the road don't see the contractor sign. They see, oh, ODOT's working on the road again. So they're going to file a lawsuit against ODOT. They're going to file, with a good attorney, file a lawsuit against the contractor, any subcontractors, and anybody else that's involved. Now, regarding this insurance, whenever we do an insurance risk assessment, we will develop appropriate insurance for that project, right? So if we have insurance in place and we have the correct language in place, within our contract, we also ask for ODOT being named as additional insured. And this is way too much information for you, I'm sure. But what that does is that says that ODOT is an additional insured on the contractor's policy or policies. So if the contractor in their operations hurts someone bodily injury or damages someone else's property, and we're sued, ODOT is sued, we can point to the contractor and the contractor's insurance, because we're additional insured, and say, because this was the operations of the contractor, we're covered. The contractor will cover the insurance will cover the legal cost and the cost to make the individual whole again. And that's what insurance is about, is to make that individual whole that you've damaged. And this is very important language. This is language that OPO reviews on every single contract, so that our, as in ODOT, risk exposure is lower. So insurance is very, very important. Okay, now that we have a basic understanding of insurance, I got some hands on who's conducted an insurance risk assessment with the current PDWP, which I hear everybody loves, so that's awesome to hear. So I've done quite a bit of work working with several of you, beta testing this tool, and I would like to introduce the new tool that we've developed. So this is the new tool that we've developed. So this tool, again, is user-friendly. I've had several of you beta test it. I've had other people that aren't project managers beta test it as well. And I will like to state that this tool is actually an Excel file. Now, people might think that Excel files are clunky, right? But I promise you this Excel tool is not. So I've developed to operate like a website. Who knows how to use the internet? Knows how to use a website? Okay, not everybody's awake yet. So I developed this tool to operate like a website. It's very seamless, user-friendly. And the goal of this tool is to save you guys time, help with further understanding, and most importantly, reduce ODOT's exposures by appropriately identifying appropriate insurance types and amounts on our projects. So let's actually go through about how to use this tool. So on the bottom, you'll see it says link, and then there's a red triangle. And there's little pop-up boxes right next to it, which gives you comments on how to use the tool. So each box that is a light blue box is actually a link internal to the tool. So when we click Commercial General Liability, it brings us to the Commercial General Liability page, and then we can assess that. And we jump back to the home page, we go to Automobile Liability, assess it, and so on and so forth. Now the blue text links are links to external pages. Now you'll see here on the very bottom, it says OPO Risk Management at odot.state.or.us. That's me, right? And these emails are throughout this document. Whenever you click on the Outlook email, it will pop up through your Outlook. It'll be automatically addressed to me, and the subject line is already pre-populated for you. So that you just need to type in the body and send it to me, and I know exactly, hey, this came from the insurance risk assessment. It says IRA right in the subject line, and it'll say like pollution liability or marine liability or whatever else, so I know exactly what it is when it's coming to me. And it saves you guys time, so you don't have to type it out every single time. Okay, the red triangles. Red triangles are comment boxes, pop-up boxes. So if you hover over a red triangle, it'll give you clarifying information on what that topic is. It'll give you examples. It'll give you directions on how to use something. Those are very, very helpful. Additional coverages, again, these are non-typical coverages, but we have some non-typical projects out there that we need to assess the risk on. Because if we're operating watercraft out there, something happens, there's not marine liability in place, ODOT can be liable. There's an exposure for ODOT. So we want to reduce that, and this is how we can reduce that. Okay, so let's get started. Commercial general liability. I know not all of you can see this. Commercial general liability has some questions in it that the PDWP already has. I will be honest, there were some great questions in there. So we gleaned some information from there. The first question is functional classification, which is a question from the PDWP. Right below it is a link to the ODOT functional classification reports. Those reports are sometimes hard to get through. Right below that is ODOT TransGIS. Who's familiar with ODOT TransGIS? Yes, okay, so everybody's excited about that tool because I saw a lot of hands. And I am too. So if you don't know how to use it, you just hover over the red triangle and I'll tell you step by step how to get the information to answer that question. So really easy, really simple. There's drop-down boxes in here, and then there's also numeric field boxes where you type in for the speed, 65 miles an hour or whatever the project speed, the highest project speed is in your project. So in this, we're looking at two different characteristics. We're looking at site characteristics on the left and site work. So site characteristics would be the functional classification, the speed, the project length, and then we're looking at site work. So number of work zone restrictions, if there's nighttime work, which is a new question, project duration in years. So if we have a long extended project, like the I-5 corridor coming up, this could extend our liability, right? So this is a new question that we're looking at too as well. Number 6 is a new question that we have as well. And this is a lot of exposure that was out there in ODOT, and now we're trying to address it. So I want to see hands after I ask this question. Will work be performed within 50 feet of any railroad property? There's got to be some people. Okay, so there's actually an exclusion in the CGO policy for coverage if there's work within 50 feet of a railroad property, which is scary, right? We expect to have this coverage in place. We're going along doing our business. Hey, we get a permit with a railroad. We do some work to whatever we need to do within the railroad property. Our CGL is excluding coverage from that area. That's scary to me. And it should be to you too, because that increases ODOT liability. If something happens in there, ODOT could be liable, and we don't have coverage in place. Neither does a contractor. Worst case scenario, contractor gets sued, contractor can't pay for it, goes out of business, we have to go out and bid again. There's a ton of expenses with that. Could be a claim against ODOT as well. So all we do is need to answer yes, no to this question. And then to the right, after we've completed our assessment, it'll come up with the proper insurance amounts that are pre-calculated for you. And it'll come up with if this endorsement is required for any work performed within 50 feet of the railroad. Now I want to take one step back. So I did say that this is an Excel file. This Excel file has not been released yet, but will be soon. I'm working on the transition plan right now to replace PDWP. This Excel file needs to be downloaded for each and every single project. So you go to the OPO site, you go to the risk management tab, and then you just download it from there, and you save it in your project file. You then conduct your insurance risk assessment and save it. Easy as that. And you work with OPO on the insurance amount so we can put that in the contract. Now the reason why you have to go to the OPO website every single time, I'm sorry about that, is because if I push out any updates in there, I can just load it on my website and you guys can get the latest and greatest from the tool. Rather than using the old tool over and over and over, you need to go to the OPO website every single time. That way I can push out updates to you so that we can stay within industry standards. Now I will let you know, I'm talking a little fast, I will let you know that PDWP has not been updated for a while. Again, that increases risk exposure for ODOT. Who knew about this endorsement? It's not in the PDWP, so again, that's risk exposure for ODOT. Okay, we've completed the commercial general liability. Now we're going to move to automobile liability. Now I've done some things in here to help you guys out and to help save some time. So we're looking at 3 different exposures on automobile liability. Site risk exposure rating. We're looking at the scope of work that the contractor will be using vehicles. And we're looking at transporting hazardous materials. The site risk exposure rating is pre-calculated, pre-populated for you. And that's within the assessment that you've done within commercial general liability. And it'll just tell you what that is. It's low, medium, or high. So what we're looking at is how will the contractor use a vehicle? So if they're just going to use a vehicle to accomplish work, driving to or from the site, if they're driving to and from state locations, or they're transporting state property, clients, or state employees. I do have a question for y'all. How many people operate a 10-plus passenger van on their project in order to move pedestrians or people around the project? Anybody? Okay, so it's happened sometimes, and that's why I have this question in here is because it's increased exposure for ODOT. When we put a lot of people in one vehicle and transport them around the project, that increases exposure because we have a lot of people on one vehicle. So regarding this question, all you do is click this link. It pops up with an email. You just type it out with me. You and I will work on the scope of work, what this looks like, and then we'll come up with some insurance requirements for this type of scope for the 10-plus passenger van. Transporting hazardous materials, I will let you know if pollution coverage is required, then coverage here for automobile liability with pollution coverage is required. This is auto-populated for you, but this is where it needs to be looked at. So once we completed this assessment, automobile liability coverage will be calculated for you, and so will pollution coverage after we've completed the pollution section. Pollution liability. How many out there with projects that have pollution, hazardous materials? Yep, so this is a little bit more common. This is going to be the same process as it was before. If you guys do have a pollution liability requirement, a pop-up is going to come up saying, hey, you need to contact OPO Risk Management, and you and I are going to work through that together to verify pollution coverage is actually needed. Pollution coverage is very expensive, and a great understanding of the scope of work, the project, the exposures are needed and to understand that this is actually applicable or not. In the PDWP, whenever you're going through the pollution liability coverage, those amounts jump quite high when you're going through the assessment. So it's really easy to get to $5–10 million when that's not needed, and that's very, very expensive to our project. Now, when we're talking about insurance and the expense of it, what is a contractor going to do? A contractor is going to look at the insurance requirements within the contract when they're bidding, and they're going to expense that, and it's going to be within their bid. So this is an expense to us as well, because it's going through the contract. Okay, pollution liability. We look at 3 different things. We look at what type of hazardous materials we have, how we're going to work with those hazardous materials, and what the site is. So within the hazardous materials, we're looking at asbestos, lead, other hazardous materials, which is defined. I only have 5 minutes, so I need to hurry up. The scale of hazardous materials, so if it's small scale, medium, large scale, I will tell you that ODOT does not operate the medium, large scale very often. It's whenever we're working with right-of-way and we're needing to replace several houses with a road, and there's asbestos in those houses and we need to abate those houses. That's kind of the medium, large scale. Then we're looking at site characteristics. So surface water, groundwater, active well, wetland, riparian area, and then also, who knows what the threatened and endangered species are within Oregon? Because I don't know all of them, and they're updated. So I have links to the native wildlife and the plant life that's operated and maintained by Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then also agriculture. So additional coverages, we'll go through these quite fast. Marine coverage, whenever you're operating a watercraft. Then we have drone coverage when we're operating a drone. We have aircraft liability when we're operating an aircraft. Builder's risk is not required very often, but this protects buildings whenever we're building or a structure. Crime protection is for use whenever the contractor has access to valuable, tangible, movable property. And Bailey's coverage when we put an asset in the hands of our contractor and they have possession and control over it. Now, when we've completed each and every section, it'll mark up there that you've completed that section. Then we go to the summary print page, which is a 2-page document within Excel that tells you all of the requirements, what insurance is required, what insurance is not, and the dollar amounts of each one, and if there's any endorsements, like that railroad endorsement. Now, understanding the transportation, the life cycle, within the construction management transition, this is whenever we're going through and we're looking at the information from the contractor. So OPO is looking at this information after the contract, and within the successful bidder, they have 15 calendar days to provide this information after they receive the contract booklets. OPO reviews the insurance requirements to verify they've met that. If they've met that, we can execute the document. If they have not met that, then that could be a failure to execute. So these are very, very important items. Now, this is a handoff to you guys. So bonds, it's important for you guys to review the requirements to properly release the bonds, review the contract file for that. Certificates of insurance, if we have a long project, insurance needs to be updated. And those insurance certificates are going to go to the contract administrator or project manager. If you guys have any questions on insurance, feel free to give me a call, by the way. If there's questions within your contract, feel free to contact your contract specialist. If there's any insurance questions or any questions about the tool, or hey, it's kind of working weird, or this language or terminology doesn't jive with us, or any other updates that you think that would be a great update to the tool, please let me know and I can easily make that and then update it and push it to our website. Lastly, I would like to thank you all for your time. I know insurance is an awesome subject. I love insurance, if you can't tell. But first, I would like to thank you for all your guys' hard work out there on the field and thinking about risk and the risk exposures. And this tool is coming out really soon. We're going to be replacing the PDWP, and instead of that, it's going to be a link to the new tool as well. That's my timer. So that tool is coming out soon. We're also going to communicate it to you in several different ways via email, and then we're also going to push it out through the OPO newsletter, and then our website, and several other ways as well. I'm hoping by the end of the year, but it might be the beginning of the year. But this tool is coming really, really soon. I'm really, really excited about it. If you have any questions about the tool, feel free to reach out to me. Any questions now?
So Zach, I got a comment and a question.
Okay.
For the comment, once the tool gets rolled out, it'd be good for you to come to the PDQ. That's where we have all our RECPs as well as TPMs, and maybe spend a little more time on the tool.
To demo it? Yeah, that'd be great. So I can do that, and then within OPO, I'll also have training that I'll provide to everybody that's interested in training.
So you covered bonds earlier. Have we ever had to exercise bonding authority from the contractors?
That is a great question, and sadly, I do not know the answer to that question. So I'm sure we have in the past, and that's why they're in place, but I'm not sure. And I think most likely the most risk that we have in the past that I've heard is that a contractor won't pay a subcontractor. That subcontractor then puts a lien on our project, and we can't move forward. So that's the time that either hopefully, right, this is a small community, so hopefully we'll reach out to the contractor, and hopefully we'll get that paid before we reach out to their bond. I know with other insurance, like professional liability or other insurance that we have, we try to reach out to the contractor first. Again, it's a small community, and we need to be partners in this together. So we try to reach out to the contractor first to try to solve the issues before we go to their insurance.
So then one other question.
Yeah.
We know projects are unique and dynamic, and that the risk assessment insurance coverage is a tool.
Right.
And that it does at times take judgment of whether the levels are right or wrong. So what should a TPM do if they feel like, wow, the insurance coverage on this thing's $10 million and we feel like it's too high?
No, that's a great question. So I've built this tool to where it's very objective rather than subjective to try to help that. There are other tools that have been put out there which are very subjective and require your biasness or whatever, or personal opinion to go into that. So I try to reduce that as much as you can, because who's an insurance professional in here? Yeah, so I'm trying to take that liability off of you and to put it on the tool, right? But in the summary page, it says that if you have any questions on the dollar amounts or something just looks weird, contact me. My email is in there, so feel free to use that and then contact me if something just feels weird. By all means, I'm available to help you guys out.
Couple more minutes for questions.
Will this tool work for the A&E contracts as well?
So that's a great question. This tool is specifically for traditional highway construction. Currently on our A&E contracts, we use the DAS tool, the DAS risk management tool. So it won't. Are you looking to replace that one? Yeah, it's in Excel as well. They just have a different format in there. It's not built to operate like a website like this one is. Yeah. Any other questions?
So any other questions in regards to insurance, regardless of it being A&E, intergovernmental agreements, permitting, other such things, we can contact you and you can point us in the right direction?
First, contact your procurement contract specialist. And if it gets raised to me, then that's fine, and you can contact me as well. So regarding A&E or goods and services or trades, that's actually a different tool, and that's through DAS Risk Management. OPO, so ODOT, has worked with DAS Risk Management to create that tool. There's also an IT insurance risk assessment that's out there that's provided by DAS Risk Management. However, the only tool that we have right now is a PDWP, which is very outdated and not brought to industry standards. So that's why we worked on updating this and built it in a way to where we can continually update it, because the insurance industry changes on an annual basis. So,
Zach, thank you so much
Yeah,
for your
very
information and for
welcome.
coming today.
I appreciate it.